what is self-compassion and why is it so important if you want to improve your mental health, physical health, your relationships, all parts of your life? So today we're going to talk about the definition of self-compassion, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to apply it in your life. So if you want to define self-compassion, an easy way to think about it is, you have the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We want to flip that. Do unto yourself as you would do unto others. So it's this idea of having love and kindness and care directed towards ourselves. That's really important. Self compassion has three main components. So I'm going to talk to you about that each one at a time. So the first component of self compassion is self kindness versus self judgment. Self kindness simply is, you know, how would I talk to a friend if they were having a hard time, if they were struggling, if they stumbled in life, if they, were going through something difficult? Would I talk to them in the way that I talk to myself? No. I would be kind, I would be loving, I would be supportive. I would do probably the opposite of the way I would treat myself. So it's really important to understand that kindness in this model of self compassion is an active thing. It's not some passive, it's not just some feeling. When we're kind to ourselves, we try to tune into what we need and we ask questions about what we need and we show that we care. We try to befriend ourselves, treat ourselves like a friend. And that can be really challenging because sometimes we might feel like, no, I have to be hard on myself. I have to be critical. I have to beat myself up or I'm going to lose my motivation. I'm going to not accomplish the things I need to accomplish. So a lot of people mistake self compassion to be some kind of way of being self indulging and self absorbed. You're not going to, spend all day binging on Netflix and eating cookies and avoiding life. That's not self compassion because, you know, it's similar to being a loving parent. A loving parent sets limits with their child. They're not going to let them eat junk food all day and stay up all night and watch TV. That would be neglectful. But they're going to find a way to connect with the child and show care and love, but they have boundaries. So we're not trying to make excuses for our behavior. We can recognize behavior needs to change without tearing ourselves down. So that's one of the ways that you want to think about this. We're so used to being competitive and judgmental and having negative thoughts, harsh criticism. And so the challenge here is to turn that around. And instead of having this kind of unstable self esteem, which is what American culture is really, that's what we have, is a lot of people trying to have self esteem, but it's unstable. We, because it's contingent upon your status, your popularity, power, how people perceive you, approval, all of that stuff. And that's not going to really help you because your self esteem can go up and down depending on what's happening. And that's why, you know, self compassion is really a better thing to focus on because when you have self compassion, you have unconditional positive regard for yourself. You are really your own best friend. And it gives you a lot of power to come back and recover from um, mistakes or failures or challenges we have in life. So the research shows that it really does the opposite when you are kind to yourself and caring and loving. It doesn't lower your motivation. It actually increases your motivation. Think about it. If you're harsh with yourself and you're a perfectionist, it does lead for a lot of people It can lead to anxiety disorders, depression. And you know what happens if you're depressed. I mean, you're not going to get out of bed. You're not going to, it's not going to help you. So the research shows that it really does the opposite when you have self compassion. The second major component that we're going to talk about is common humanity versus isolation. Common humanity versus isolation. This is really a game changer when people learn how to get in touch with their common humanity. It's very common. I see this with clients all the time. Something happens and then something negative happens in their life. And then they start to feel like I'm uniquely screwed up. I'm a bad person. I can't do life. I'm different from everybody else. We start to have self pity, which is really not helpful. If anything, self pity is kind of almost a narcissistic um, behavior. You're self absorbed. You're focusing on what's wrong with you, and that leads to a lot of shame, and that cuts us off. That leads to isolation. It kind of cuts us off from humanity. We see ourselves different from other people in a very negative way. So this is really powerful when you're able to change it, when we're able to recognize, wait a second, life is hard. I'm human. And a lot of people go through the things I'm going through. There are lots of people that have the kinds of struggles that you have, that feel the way you feel. This is really powerful when you can get in touch with this because we're human beings. We want to break away from isolation, which it's very common when people have problems with addiction and things like that. They isolate because they feel shame and they're trapped. So when we get in touch with our common humanity and realize we're not alone, that liberates us and that allows us to feel connection with others. So connection is what life is all about. I have a lot of experience with the feeling of being different, feeling disconnected and isolated. I've struggled with health problems, you know, personal relationship problems and family history that, um, you know, has affected me negatively. Even though I'm a therapist and I've learned about all the different theories that can help people, it doesn't change the fact that I might intellectually know this stuff, but applying it in my own life is what is necessary. You can't just learn this stuff intellectually. You have to practice it. You know, common humanity versus isolation is really important in another way. If you think about it, one of the biggest threats to human beings is being isolated from the group, disconnected from the group. People that are, the number one fear you think people might have is fear of death. But the research shows that the number one fear that people have is speaking in public. And I think that's because we fear that we're going to be rejected by the group. So this is evolutionary psychology. There's an evolutionary basis for these feelings. It's deeply embedded in our brains, in our nervous system, to be afraid of being rejected by the group. So our survival would depend on it. Your ancestors' survival depended on it. So that is another factor when we are trying to resolve the problem of common humanity versus isolation. We want to really we want to really recognize that, hey, instead of being inward focused, like I'm uniquely screwed up, my life is uniquely bad, or things aren't working out, instead of being inward focused, that's what happens when we're isolating. We want to have compassion because compassion is more outward focused. We're able to recognize, wait a second, I'm not really that unique. I see pain all over the place. There's a lot of suffering in the world, and all people, all human beings go through ups and downs. Everyone. It doesn't matter how much money they have or what their life looks like on social media. It doesn't really matter. All people have failures and pain and suffering and tragedy and difficult times in life. Life is really difficult. So when we can recognize that, we can start to see that, hey, I'm not that alone. Other people feel the way I do. So this is a really powerful factor to self compassion. The third component to self compassion is what we call mindfulness versus over identification. If you know anything about meditation or mindfulness, the idea is we recognize our thoughts, we recognize our feelings, and we observe them. We don't let our thoughts, we don't get swept away by our thoughts. We practice being here in the present. So a lot of times people get swept away by their thoughts by, focusing on, what do I have to do next? Let me go wash my hands really quickly because I want to go do X, Y, and Z. Let me hurry up here. So we're rushing all the time and, or we're trying to avoid certain feelings, that kind of thing. And our thoughts can put us into the future. We get worried about what's going to happen tomorrow or what if this or what if that. Or our thoughts can bring us into the past where we can get depressed and wish it didn't happen this way, or what if I did this? Maybe this wouldn't have happened. That sort of thing. And when we wind up in the future or in the past, we're not really here. We're not in the present, and that takes that's one way that your mind can disempower you. It can cause you to not be here in the present, and then you just wind up missing out on life. This is really important because when we practice mindfulness, we can identify our thoughts and our feelings and watch them. We can be present without trying to fix the pain. And that's very counterintuitive because a lot of us, when we're suffering, we try to solve it right away. We want to fix things right away. I don't want to feel this. What do I have to do to make this better right now? Really, our culture has become like that more and more. We're always trying to solve problems, and that's natural. And it's not a bad thing to try to solve our problems. But, sometimes we can get so wrapped up in these thoughts, in our pain, that, we're trying to, we start to become trapped by these thoughts and these feelings. We start to become trapped by the part of us that's trying to control what we're feeling, and that can be an interesting example that I see in my practice is, I have clients that are really critical. They have that inner critic, and it's hard for them to manage those negative thoughts and that inner critic because it's there and they feel like if they let that go, they won't have control. In some kind of way, it's a subtle form of control. And when we're trying to control things, when we're trying to avoid unpleasant experiences, we're going to have unpleasant, unwanted experiences in life. So we want to learn how to feel them, have our feelings, and know that they come and go. It's okay to slow down, to practice being with the pain, validate your feelings. Go, okay, I'm hurting. This is really upsetting. And take a breath. Validate, be present without judgment. And yeah, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good, but if we validate our experience, that allows, there's a paradox to it. If we accept what we're experiencing, if we accept ourselves unconditionally in our experience, our lives, everything that happens in life, if we learn to accept that, the paradox is it leads to change. So to wrap up, you want to think about self-compassion, cultivating self-compassion and learning how to do this. And I'll be talking about that in a future video. I hope you stick around and like and subscribe and comment. If you have any questions or you want to share your own experience, that would be great. I love helping people, and I want to be there for you and offer the experiences I've had as a therapist, as a human being, and hopefully that can help you. Um, so to really wrap up, think of self-compassion as a loving parent, a parent that isn't enabling you to behave in ways that are self-defeating. It's a parent that is present, that recognize what you're feeling, and wants to, you want to ask yourself, what do I need? What do I need to take care of myself? This is really a lot more important than developing self-esteem. That's not really Self-esteem is not stable, but self-compassion is, and it'll give you the resilience, power, and the strength to face life head on. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.